Okay, so there are two main approaches to soloing. The first one is to follow the key, and the second one is to follow the chords. So how do we use scales to do both of these things? Well, in this video, I'm gonna show you how with 5 different but connected scales. Really quick, I just wanna mention that I just launched my very first guitar course last week called Listen and Play. It's all about learning to play guitar completely by ear. So if you like my style of teaching, wanna help support the channel, and that it all sounds interesting to you, I will put a link at the top of the description where you can go to learn more about it. All right, before we talk about anything else, there are 2 important things that you need to know. The first is something called a tonic. And in the most simple terms, a tonic is essentially the root note of a scale. So when we have a chord like a C major chord, we call the C the root. Right in that chord, it's made up of a bunch of notes. The root note of that chord is just the note that shares the name of the chord. A D minor chord, the root note of that chord would be a D. Well, with a tonic, so in the case of scales, the tonic of a C major scale would be a C note. The tonic of a D minor scale would be a D note. Pretty simple stuff. The other thing that you need to know is the difference between relative and parallel scales. So we'll start with parallel scales, which essentially are scales that share the same tonic. So a C major scale and a C minor scale are parallel scales because even though they are different scales containing different notes, they both start on that C. The C is the tonic. Relative scales have different tonics but share the same notes. So for example, something like a C major scale and an A minor scale, they all contain the same notes, however they start at different points. And obviously the tonic of a C major scale is C, the tonic of an A minor scale is A. To explain this just a little bit further, if I spelled out all the notes in a C major scale, I would get C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now we typically number these 1 through 7. Now, if I started this exact same scale from the 6th note, and this would be the same for any major scale, and I played the same notes, I would have my relative minor scale. So in this case, I would have my A minor scale. So if I played A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I would have an A minor scale. So parallel scales, same tonic, different notes in the scale. Relative scales, same notes in the scale, but different tonics. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over what many people consider to be the 5 essential guitar scales. So these are the minor pentatonic scale, the major pentatonic scale, the major scale, the natural minor scale, and the blues scale. And with each of these scales, we will be using the same tonic. So A minor pentatonic, A major pentatonic, and so on and so forth. So let's start with the A minor pentatonic scale. It looks like this. Next, we'll move on to the A major pentatonic scale. So again, same tonic, different scale, starting from that A note. Next, we'll move on to our A major scale, and this is going to look very similar to our A major pentatonic scale because all we are doing with the pentatonic scale is taking 2 notes away from our major scale. So we are going to be putting those 2 notes back into this scale, turning it from a 5-note scale into a 7-note scale. Next up, we've got the natural minor scale, which we commonly just call the minor scale. And this one is going to look very similar to our minor pentatonic scale, because again, all we're doing here is bringing back those 2 notes that we took out to turn our minor scale into a pentatonic scale. So this one is going to look like this. So I know we're moving through these scale shapes really quickly. If you need to, feel free to pause or slow down the video. I also have all of the graphics in this video available as a downloadable PDF, available over on Patreon, or if you become a YouTube channel member, there'll be links down in the description if that's something you're interested in. Onto our final scale here, we've got the blues scale, and this scale is definitely not just for blues, it's just the way that we name it and what it's been used for historically. And all we are doing for this scale is we are taking our regular minor pentatonic scale and we are they're adding one blue note. And this is a note that is not diatonic, so it means it is not naturally occurring inside the key, but it always sounds really cool whenever you want to throw it in. So that looks like this. Okay, so before we start putting these scales to work, we just kind of need to clear a couple things up. First, one of those is we've got 5, 6, and 7 note scales. When are you really supposed to use each one? Well, really all it comes down to is that they all just kind of have a slightly different sound. They're all gonna work in their respective keys over those chord progressions. It's not really gonna make a difference as far as right and wrong. They're just gonna sound slightly different. So it really comes down to just being an artistic, creative choice. Okay, so now you might be thinking, well, we've got A major and A minor, right? These aren't gonna work over the same track, so they're not connected, right? Well, we can combine all 5 of these shapes together through our relative scales. So if you remember back to when I was talking about C major and A minor being relative scales, having all the same notes, what that means is when I play an A minor scale right here, that my C major scale is living inside of that shape. I just have to start it from a C note. So this is A, this is B, this is C. So if I started this exact same scale shape from that C note, that would just be a C major scale. So whenever I'm playing that A minor scale, I'm technically also playing C major at the same time. And if you want to take that a step further, that means what you can do is you could play a C major scale using the shape that I just showed you. So think back to that major scale shape, and instead of putting that on an A note, because it would be an A major scale, we're going to make it a C major scale, which is right up here on the 8th fret. So if I play a C major scale, that sounds the exact same as we got a little access to an extra note there, but exact same scale. So what that means is now, instead of just having this one position in the key of A minor, right, the A minor scale, well, we have our major scale just attached right onto it. As you can see, both of these shapes are totally connected to one another because A minor and C major are relative scales. And of course, this would be the same if we were using the pentatonic variant. So I put my major up here on the C note. We're looking at all the same notes. And what I can do is I can even add that blue note in there, right? So that one's easy, right? Well, that one lives right inside my new shape too. So if I'm playing through this here, again, it's just all one big, beautiful, connected shape. The quick and easy way to remember your relative major and minor scales is if we go back to the basic minor pentatonic or minor scale position, we look at our first finger on the low E string, that is our relative minor, and where does our pinky go? Our relative major, right? A, C. If I were to move this to a different position, right here, this is a B note, and this here is a D note, well, B minor is relative to D major. And again, all those shapes would all be the same. Okay, so that means we've essentially mashed together all 5 of our essential scales so we can use them all together in one key. Now it's time to talk about how we can actually use these scales to solo over top of a song. And it's fairly simple. It basically comes down to aligning the key of a song with the scale that you are going to play. So if a song is in the key of C major, you would use the C major scale. If a song is in the key of D minor, you would use the D minor scale. And all the notes in each of those scales would sound great over every single chord in that key. And because we've mushed all these scales together, whenever we're playing over top of a song, we now have access to every single note in that combined scale shape. So that's both the major and minor pentatonic scales, the major scale, the minor scale, and also the blues scale. As long as we're doing this in the same key as the song, we're safe. You can straight up just play random notes from the scale, and slowly you'll start formulating your own licks, coming up with your own ideas. Pretty much every lick you're gonna copy from somebody, they're just using these exact notes. So obviously before you start soloing, you need to know what position that scale shape should be in. So you need to know the key of the song. If you wanna know how to do that by ear, I have a video that'll teach you how to do it. I'll have it linked below somewhere in the description, but otherwise you can just look up the key of a song and then all you have to do is align that scale with the key, right? So if it is in, let's say, C minor, well, I'm gonna take my pointer finger and I'm gonna find a C note and I'm gonna place that scale shape here. Okay, I know C minor / E flat major. That's my relative major, and all of my scales are just gonna live inside of that. Same thing would be, let's say it was B flat major is the key of the song. Well, I'm gonna use my pinky this time to find that B flat note on the low string. There's a B flat. That means that my relative minor is on my pointer finger. So it's G minor / B flat major, and all of my scale shapes would be the exact same, just in this new position. The other method for playing solos using scales is to follow the chords. And I see a lot of guitar players kind of think that this means when a C major chord comes along, I play the C major scale. When the G major chord comes along, I play the G major scale. When the D minor chord comes along, I play the D minor scale, etc., etc. This is not gonna work at all. Instead, what we wanna do is we wanna stay in the scale shape we're already on. So if the chord progression is in C major, we are still playing the C major / A minor scale in that position. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna specifically target notes in that scale that match up with the chords as they come by. So this is something we call targeting chord tones. And obviously there's more than one note inside each of these chords that we can target. But because we are new to this, we are only gonna focus on targeting the root notes of the chords as they come by. So that would mean when there's an A minor chord, I'm playing an A note. When there is an F major chord, I am targeting an F note. So for example, in that chord progression I just described, there's my A minor. I want to target that A note, or maybe that A note. The F major comes along, I'm going to hit my F note, or maybe this one. And the idea is not to just play that note over the chord, it's just to hit that note while that chord is happening, right? To just kind of tie what you're playing, the solo you're playing, into the chord progression that's happening beneath. One thing I'd recommend is if you are gonna take the chord tone route, it's very helpful to know the chord progression ahead of time and also know the location of all of those root notes or other chord tones in advance before it's time to actually take your solo. All of these notes will live inside the shape. And if you happen to know anything about the number system, that can really help here because you'll know the number of the chord will align with the number of the note inside the scale, which can make recognizing those notes a lot easier and faster. All right, now I'm gonna pull up a backing track and I'm gonna show you all of this stuff in action. Okay, so this track is in the key of C major / A minor. That means the position that we've already learned will work for this song. And I'm just playing random notes here. Just experiment. Or I can follow the root notes. An A note to follow the A minor chord, then we've got a C major chord, so C note, and then a G chord, that's a G note. And I can follow that if I want, but I don't have to. It's my C note, G note. Now we're going into a different chord progression, but we're in the same key. So still. Again, random notes. And again, I can do root notes. So as you can see, I can transition between the two, I can mix and match. It doesn't really matter that much. Again, the chord tones themselves are the ones that are gonna require more preparation because you have to know the chord progression in advance to really be able to do this. But again, if I just play those random notes, that still sounds just as great because they're still all in the same key. So I think in many cases, what a lot of guitar players will do is they'll want to learn licks that work, right? Of all the things that I was playing a whole bunch of little licks from inside the scale. But my goal here is to teach you how to fish, not give you the fish. I've used that analogy before. And the idea is use the randomness to generate your own licks and ideas and start developing things that are uniquely yours. If you know how to tie in a lick or two and you want to copy something, if you want to copy maybe what I did, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the whole idea is you know what you have access to, you know what works, and then it's just about putting it to use, getting the reps in and doing this a lot. And you'll notice you start coming up with things. It's like, I really like the way it sounds to go from here to here. So I'm going to do this more often. And all of a sudden that becomes your own lick. The more you do it, the better it's gonna sound. And this track that you just heard, I'll have it available for you to download totally free. Just go down into the description. I know I've mentioned that a few times. You'll see it there. It's the Slow Pop Jam Track Pack. That's gonna have this track in there along with 2 others that are really great for practicing this type of thing along to. As far as what's next, I have the perfect video for you. It's about combining caged with the pentatonic scale. Even if you don't know the cage system, that's not super important. Basically what I'm teaching is how to find all of the chord tones of every naturally occurring chord from within a key, all inside that one position. So rather than just being like, okay, I'm gonna nail just that root note inside of here, I'm gonna show you the little chord shapes that all live inside this scale shape that you just learned to be able to hit every single chord tone whenever you want. I have a link to that video up in the middle of the screen for you now. If you wanna help support the channel and learn how to play guitar by ear, make sure you check out my new guitar course. Again, links down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.